This is Diana Sullivan in Austin, Texas. I've been asked to teach how to do hand-counted ferrule using circular knitting with a ribber. In circular knitting, the main bed knits this side of the knitting and the ribber knits this side of the ribbing so that you get this tube. Now my tube's joined on the bottom because I didn't do waste yarn. Normally to do circular knitting you would do a few rows of waste yarn that could be removed later, and that would give you an open tube. And heck, you might even want it closed on the bottom. Now I did a few rows of stripes first. I think you should always swatch this before you get involved in a garment. And as I swatched, I wanted to make sure that my color changer was doing beautiful switches. Now this can be done another way without a color changer, but it's much more difficult. On this side where the fold is, where it changes from main bed to ribber, you see how it has this perfect match in both the stripes and the ferrule? You don't get that on the color changer side. The color changer makes it just be off a little bit as you go up, and you'll have to decide how much that bothers you. There's a way around it, but it is a lot of work. Anyway, this is a ferrule, and by that I mean seamless. It is not a double jacquard. There are floats. Let's turn it inside out. Naturally, you don't have any floats in the stripes, but when you get up into the ferrule, you do have floats. Floats are these places where the yarn has a stitch and skips a few because it doesn't have that color for a few stitches, leaving a loop on the back. So it's very important for this technique to be willing to choose patterns with fairly short floats. This pattern has no floats longer than 3 stitches, and I happen to think this pattern is really very pretty. This is a little bit tedious and you wouldn't want to do a whole lot of it, but it's a beautiful embellishment for garments. Now, I don't push the idea of knitting garments circular because I think it's easier to knit them flat, and I think everyone can learn to do beautiful seams that don't show at all on the front. But as a technical exercise, I think this is wonderful, and I actually did knit a circular round yoke sweater for a child this way at one time. I had a pattern around each of the sleeves, and then I had a pattern around the body where the sleeves and body are joined, and it has the circular yoke. It was quite beautiful. Now this is 2 colors. You could do more colors, but the more colors you do in a single row, the more passes required and the more floats that are created. I have installed a 4-color KRC 900 on this Brother 270. The 900 model works on the bulky machine, and I'm going to go ahead and thread the changer. I have put the changer's upper tension unit on the machine. I'm only using 2 colors, so this is pretty easy. Let's thread the white first. This off-white is a soft DK yarn. It's actually Brushworks, and it's got a little bit of alpaca, and I found that the color changer likes it. It knits really well. So what I'm going to do is put it between the beds, catch my hand on the yarn, and put the end of the yarn, there's a yarn clip down here at the left end of the machine, and I'm putting the yarn in that clip, and then I'm going to put it on the far left eyelet of the changer. So I'll put it in there, hold it, and snap that button back so that I can feed the next color. Now, I thought it was kind of nice to have, since I only have 2 colors, I put one in number 4 and I put one in number 1, so there's 2 empty ones in the middle. You can do it the way you want, but it is very helpful to take the yarn from the left antenna and put it in the left changer, and then take the yarn from a right antenna and put it in a right changer. Now once again, I'm feeding this yarn between the beds, reach in, grab the stuff, put the end in the yarn clip, so that'll stay for me and I don't have to keep a hand on it. Open the slot where I want it in, put it in. So I've fed my yarn into the color changer. To pick up a yarn, move the carriage all the way to the far left and listen for a nice loud click. Then push the color that you want and bring the carriage out. And then if you're a coward like me, you can look at that yarn and make sure it's behind this finger. First row, zigzag row, tightest tension, no buttons, no levers, plain, plain, plain. And I'll pop the zigzag row in, going from left to right. Not always the way we do it, but it works well for this pattern. Now I have put out 24 needles on the ribber and 24 on the main bed. I am in 3H. You must be in half pitch so your needles cross each other like that. If the needles match up, you can get collisions. Now I'm going to hang a comb between the beds and up through the needles. Now the comb's on, but circular knitting requires more weight than other kinds of ribber work. So for these few stitches, I'm using 2 of the big, heavy 1-pound weights. I'm going to go put one on each end of the knitting. So now I have my zigzag row and I've hung my weights. I'm going to do 2 rows circular. Now I have my zigzag row, I've hung my comb, I've hung my weights, and I want to do 3 passes in circular setting. So let's have a look at the carriages. For this, I'm going to bring the right lever up, the PR lever on the ribber, push in the left part button on the carriage. That makes it slip to the left. The ribber's going to slip to the right. And I'm going to bring this up to tension 2. And I'm going to knit 2 rows. And then I'm going to bring it on up to tension 3. And I'm just going to make a piece. I'm just going to make a piece of knitting to be the base before we begin the Fair Isle. So I'll just go back and forth and do that and be back in a minute. Now that I've done that, I have to get my carriage on the left. Over on the left, I can begin my Fair Isle pattern. A change in the carriage settings is needed now. Believe it or not, I want to set both carriages to knit nothing unless it's selected. So PR on the bottom carriage for the ribber will knit none of the needles unless they're selected, and both part buttons on the main carriage will now knit nothing unless it's selected. Now we're going to hand pick needles and work from a chart. And to help me keep track of where I am, I'm getting my row counter onto 0, 0, 0. Every time I go across and bump the row counter, the number changes. But guess what? One round of knitting, over and back, main bed and then ribber, is going to take 4 passes. 2 passes of white, 2 passes of gray. Now let's look at my chart. First of all, my chart is 12 stitches wide. I have 24 stitches on the main bed and 24 stitches on the ribber, which means we're doing this chart twice on the main bed and twice on the ribber. Also over here I have some tiny numbers. These tiny numbers over here are an indication to me to help me keep track of where I am. I have 2 columns of the tiny numbers. I have a white column and a blue column. And my white column are the first 2 rows I knit for this row of pattern stitches. The first row, number 1, is from left to right, getting white color onto certain main bed needles. And then row 2 is from right to left, getting white color onto certain ribber needles. Then row number 3 is back over the main bed needles, putting a few blue stitches in, and then row number 4 is back over the ribber needles, getting the blue stitches on the ribber. Those 4 rounds, 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the row counter, gives me 1 row in my chart. And it's got a slider to help me keep my place. So I have that, and then I have the row counter to help me keep my place. You could put the chart on a table, and you could move a ruler up, or you could put it on a metal board, maybe a music stand, and move a magnet up, or you could take a pencil and scribble out the chart row that you just finished. Whatever way you want to do it, but since I had this gadget, I thought this will be so easy for you to see on camera. Now my first row, my first pass, my first quarter row, whatever it is, my first procedure from left to right is going to be just a few white stitches, starting with 2 white stitches and then skipping 1 and doing 3. So here's the stitches, the needles I pull out for that. Let's get in close. I'm going to pull out the first 2 and skip 1, and then move out 3, skip 1, do 3, skip 1, and do 3. I do that all the way across because I have 2 repeats, and I can't pull out 3, I can only pull out 1, and I consult my chart to see if I did that right, and sure enough, the last single needle is white. Now, when I knit from left to right, I will knit row 1, and only the pulled out needles will be knitted with white yarn. So over I go, and that is row 1. Row 2 is on the ribber needles, but it's weird. Here's what's weird. You have to do it coming back to the left backwards. You have to start with this end. Why? Because it's folded around. So we start with 2 white needles, skip 1, and do 3 white needles. And we skip 1 and do 3, right on across. We end with 1 white needle. Always check your last needle, and that'll help you make sure that you counted correctly. If you end with the right number, you're probably not off a needle, right? So we're going to go to the left. That was row 2, and it did our round of the off-white stitches. Now I need to change to the gray color, which is represented on my chart as a light blue. I go all the way until my color changer clicks, pop the gray button in, and the machine picks up gray yarn in the feeder. And if you feel chicken about it, you can go ahead and reach down there and make sure that it's only the gray and that it's right in the feeder where you want it. But after a while, you'll gain confidence. Now, which needles need to be gray? Whatever needles need to be gray get pulled to hold position. So I start with 2 white stitches in this row, so the third one needs to be the gray. And then I skip 3 and pull 1 out. I can see that just by looking at my chart. So skip 3 and pull 1 out, right on across, and following that pattern, I end with 1 not pulled out is white. So that's good. I counted right. So let me knit to the right and put my gray in. Now I need to knit to the left and put my gray on the ribber. Now I mentioned before that we have to go backwards, coming back because we've already got 1 white stitch there. We need 2 more. So 2 whites, and then we put a gray, skip 3, gray, skip 3. And we do the skip 3 thing all the way across, ending with 1 white non-selected needle at the left-hand edge. And that will be row number 4. Check your row counter, say, gee, I'm on row 4. Check your chart and say, look, 1, 2, 3, 4. That finishes the first line on the chart. I've moved my ruler up so I can do 5, 6, 7, 8. I always do white first. That means every time I'm on the left-hand side, I change colors. All the way into the color changer for a click, push the white button, pick up the white yarn, check and make sure the white yarn is fed properly, and that's all there is to picking up the white yarn. Now for this row here, let's see what needles need to be white stitches. The first, and then skip 3. So this one, and then this one, skipping 3 all the way across because that's the pattern. I'm going to end with 3 blue, so I know I've counted that out correctly. Knit to the right, that's my white for that row. Now, coming back, starting on the left, but picking needles from the right, 1 white. And another way to look at that is, look, I already knitted 3 blues up on the top, so the next stitch has to be a white. That's kind of our repeating pattern, isn't it? So 1 white, skip 3, is the pattern on the bottom. And I end with 3 blue ones. Well, that's good because my chart shows 3 blue ones. So I knit to the left. That was row number 6. And if I look at my chart, I can see that rows 5 and 6 were my 2 white rows. For 7 and 8, I need the gray. So pick up the gray. I'm double checking it's in the feeder the way I want it. Now I have to pick out the foreground needles, the blue on my chart. And I'm going to skip 1 and pick 3 blue. Skip 1, pick 3 blue. Gray and blue are the same. I didn't have a blue that went with this yarn, but green and blue seems close enough for my brain to process it. So I ended my line of needles with 3, and on my chart, good, 3 of the darker color. That's good. So I knit to the right, knitting just beautifully. Now I have to come back to the left and do the same thing, but I start from the left on the picture, I count from the right on the picture. As I said earlier, another way to look at that is I have already got 3 grays here, and the next thing in sequence would be a white. So 1 white and then 3 grays. Skip 1 and do 3 on across. Ending with 3 grays. Let's see, ending with 3 grays. Good, that matches my picture. This will be row 8. Row 8 completes all the boxes in this row. I've got my little cheat list right there, so I can go up to the 3rd row and do the same thing. Switch to white yarn, count the white needles out. It's going to be the 3rd, and then skip 3 on across. 3rd one, skip 3. Ending with 1 blue. Look at my picture. It ends with 1 blue. That's good. Coming over. Coming back. It's going to be skip 2 and put a white. So skip these 2. That makes sense to me because I'm going to have a gray, and a gray, then a white. And now I do my skip 3 thing. I end with 1 needle I didn't pull up. It's this guy. Well, good, because on my chart I end up with 1 of the dark color. So over I go, thread the other color, and count out the dark color needles. So the dark color needles are going to be 2 stitches first, so you 2. Then skip 1 and do groups of 3. You, and 1 more, because I only skipped the 1, ending with 1 dark needle. That's good. I'm counting correctly, matches my chart. If you count incorrectly and you need to put needles back, you're going to have to use a transfer tool and put the stitches back in the latches and get them all the way back to B position. Anything in B position is going to be skipped. Anything in upper working position, that is, anywhere in between or fully extended, is going to be knitted. So if you change your mind and you don't want to knit it, put it all the way back with the stitch in the latch safely. So I knit to the right. This will be row 11. And for row 12, I'm going to start with 2 grays on this end. That gives me 1, 2, and 3 grays over here. And then I skip a needle and bring up 3s on across. Now, I've made a mistake. If you make a mistake, you gotta fix it. So I need these 3, but not this one. So that has to go in the hook and be down. And then I need that last needle. Now, I'm supposed to end with 1 of the dark needles on the left. And over here on the right, goody, 1 of the dark needles. So I've gone through this routine several times, and I'm going to turn off my camera and finish it on my own, and then we'll take it out of the machine and you can have a good look at how it looks. Once I've done all the Fair Isle chart, I've actually done 44 clicks on the row counter. And if I would like to finish this off with the off-white, which I would, I'm going to put that in the feeder. And I want it to be plain off-white, so I'm going to change my settings back to circular knitting with this right lever up, and that's going to slip only to the right, and then on the named carriage, the left button in, that's going to slip only to the left. That'll allow me to knit my circles. So let me put some circles on so we can take this off and see how it turned out. Now I'm going to change colors and use the gray for waste yarn so that I can actually bind this off later, because I want to keep this sample. So let me swap colors. And when you want to put waste yarn on circular knitting, do extra. If you want 8 rows, do 16. Well, I should say if you want 8 rounds, 8 complete circles, do 16 clicks on the row counter. So here we go. 1. Now I'm going to cancel the parts, and I'm going to cut the yarn and cut the gray and cut the white, and I'm going to let the knitting drop. Now I'll take it off of all the hardware and show it to you. Well, gosh, I'm happy with this. This turned out fine. Turned out just like the other sample that I showed you, except this time I didn't do the stripes. I was just double checking my color changer and making sure that it fed well. Now your yarn's going to come in from the side when you start the dark color, and that's okay. Just get a needle and hide that end inside. And it's also going to come out from the side at the top. And then here's my white yarn. So I could crochet around this or bind off any which way I want. You do have floats in the inside. And this was on a bulky machine, so you don't have to spend quite so long counting it all out. You do have a little bit of shadowing where through the white you can see some of the gray floats in the background, but it isn't enough shadowing to bother me. And I should also point out, if you're a hat knitter, if you pull on this zigzag row and straighten it, then you can eventually gather up the bottom, and that'll give you a tubular hat. Of course, you'd have to add some sort of welt on this end to go around the person's head, and this would be up at the crown of the hat. I forgot, I need to fold that out so you can see that that matches right around the corner, and on the color changer side it almost matches. It's just a little bit off. In fact, I have a way to get around that, but it is so much extra work. So much fiddling with the yarn and not being able to use a color changer, and so much opportunity to make a mistake and actually drop the knitting because you've gotten out of the feeder, that what I would say is do it this way and just correct that with just a couple of duplicate stitches, and that'll fix that. So you can get this done reasonably fast that way. So that's how to do Fair Isle on a circular setup with a ribber.